Hey, what's going on? This is King Kong 1900, and today I wanted to talk to a lot of G fans about why they should respect King Kong way more than they do. I found myself encountering a lot of very obnoxious G fans, and what I find most common is that they always shit on King Kong. It's honestly really annoying and just sad to see because they truly don't know what an effect Kong has had on Godzilla and giant monsters in general. And let me make this clear. I am a Godzilla fan. Even though as a kid I had a greater love for Kong and still do, my heart for Godzilla is still there and I love the big guy. I mean, go look at my channel if you don't believe me. You know, since I was like 8, I've been making Godzilla videos. I didn't start this channel when I was 8, but I was like, I used to take my dad's BlackBerry and I would take my Bandai Final Wars Godzilla and even the Hedorah figure, and I would just like, you know, mash them up against the... It wasn't a Lego building, but it was some like car building thing. I don't know. But yeah, anyways, after establishing my non-biased viewpoint, let's get on to why people should truly respect King Kong. The one reason I find a lot of people disrespect Kong is because he's just a plain old giant gorilla. This is understandable, you know, dinos look cooler, but personally I think Kong is way cooler. I find his story way more interesting and less boring. You know, you can get very creative with his design. I'll get into his design and my personal headcanon of how he'd truly be later, but right now let's talk about how Kong even inspired Godzilla and how he has a bigger role than you think. So King Kong was the first giant monster. He birthed the genre. Some people will say that The Land Before Time was the first kaiju film, but no, it wasn't. King Kong was the first giant monster who was far-fetched and fanatical, not a dinosaur that actually existed. So Kong is the first giant monster. He was America's first giant monster and, get this, was Japan's first giant monster, even pioneering in suitmation. Sounds like bullshit, but it's true. These films were lost in the Hiroshima bombings, unfortunately, but the first one, which came out in 1933, was called Wasei Kingu Kongu. I'm so sorry if I butchered that. But the second one, which came out in 1938, was called King Kong Appears in Edo. Edo? But yeah, you guys might believe Godzilla was Japan's first giant monster that pioneered in suitmation, but you're wrong. It was King Kong. King Kong also drastically inspired Godzilla. From having a monster ravage a city to the famous King of the Monsters tagline, Kong inspired it all. Tomoyuki Tanaka is quoted, "I want to make a movie where a big monster attacks Tokyo the same way King Kong attacked New York." You may hear that the beast from 20,000 Fathoms inspired Godzilla, but yet again, King Kong inspired the beast from 20,000 Fathoms with his theatrical release in 1952. So King Kong inspired Godzilla. Now, an interesting thing about the famous King of the Monsters tagline, originally it was going to be released called Godzilla the Sea Beast. But the American distributor Goldman had to steal the king from Kong and dub Godzilla the king of the monsters, even boasting that the film would make King Kong look like a Peter Pan in comparison. So in order to sell Godzilla, they had to tear down King Kong. So King Kong has been a major influence on Godzilla. I hope you guys enjoyed. You don't have to keep watching, but if you think King Kong sucks because he's just a giant ape, then keep watching because I'm going to give you my personal headcanon on how he'd be with Godzilla and stuff as a legit kaiju. Let me just get this out there that a lot of people hate Kong because he died from bullets. The thing is, those were retellings of the classic story, so of course he'd die. It's supposed to have a tragic ending. But when King Kong is a kaiju, he can work incredibly well as one. The reason we haven't gone the Japanese style kaiju versus films is because America was not really into that. Sure, we had monster films, but not the versus ones where Godzilla was well known for. I mean, there'd rather be good story than just mindless kaiju fighting and forgetful characters, no offense. Personally, I always liked Kong more than OP heroes because he never depended on being invincible or having regen. His battles have stakes and every fight is a fight for his life. Even as a kid, I understood this and could never get into Goku or Superman. But yeah, if America did make the kinds of versus kaiju flicks that Godzilla had, or if Kong and Godzilla ever crossed over, Kong would be shown as a true kaiju. How would he be shown as a true kaiju? Now we get into my personal headcanon. My personal headcanon design of him is where he's incredibly lean but has gigantic muscles in his arms and legs. He has unique scarring, a head much like 2005 King Kong's, but a long face like 1962 King Kong's. As he's in his prime, his fur would be brown, and as he gets older, it becomes black like 2005's. His scarring would be very unique, and after his big battle with Godzilla, he'd have scars across his face and no hair on his bicep, back, torso. You know, he'd have scarring combinations from 2005 Kong, 2017 Kong, and obviously, you know, post-Godzilla battle, he would have scarring from Zimat's Kong. This incredible animation literally changed my life. Sounds gay to say, but it's true. You know, his teeth would be all jagged and sharp, and his fangs are huge, with his lower left one being mangled like 2005's. You know, you want this Kong to be like a monster, not just an overgrown ape, you know, so you don't want him to have molars or anything like that. You want him to have jagged, sharp teeth that he just looks like a monster, you know. He'd always snarl and bare his teeth way more often, you know, he'd be showing his gums. And speaking of gums, you know, he'd have that trademark 2005 scar that leads from his eye to his upper lip. And he'd even be missing a chunk of flesh where his lip would be, and this would always reveal his gums, even when his mouth is closed. Just a tiny bit though, you know, not like a massive amount of gum is gonna be shown, but just a very tiny bit towards the end of where that scar ends. He'd have somewhat of a silverback and the famous 05 scarring, and his forearms would be way furrier than the rest of his body. This means all blows to his massive forearms would be somewhat cushioned and protected. So when he always blocks like a dino bite or even Godzilla's atomic breath, it would do less damage than it would if he blocked it like with his stomach or something. That doesn't even make sense, but you know. His extremely muscular arms would be very long, with his fingers reaching around the middle of his shin. He'd constantly switch from bipedal to quadruple, and he is shorter when on all fours, around half Godzilla's height, but he switches so he can move way faster. On two legs, he's around a head and a half smaller than Godzilla, like in this Cam Win poster. It's very accurate to how I want Kong's height to be compared to Godzilla's. I love the idea of having King Kong switching from biped to quadruped and back to biped to aid him in the battle. Now, his powers. He wouldn't have any. You know, much like Rocky or Captain America, his only real power would be his will. It's like the last scene of Infinity War where Cap holds Thanos' glove up in the air. King Kong would have certain powers though. Well, I like to think of them as more advantages. For one, since he's incredibly muscular, he's very strong. Much like an ape, can lift over 8 times his own weight. So even if Godzilla was around 90,000 tons, King Kong would only be like 35,000 tons, around that area. This shows he'd be way faster than Godzilla, but can still match and excel him in physical strength. Godzilla would be only like 3 times his weight, so he will be thrashing Godzilla around. At most, he'd be able to swing King Ghidorah, barely. His extreme strength also is his main weapon. He can do things like smash the ground, causing it to crack around the opponent, making it tremble and eventually crumble. He punches holes in the wall to climb, he can ragdoll his opponents, and yeah, he can just be a beast. He'd have a very loud roar, much like Anguirus's in Destroy All Monsters Melee, so he can be dazing his opponents and temporarily even deafen them. And he'd be durable enough to withstand many beams from other monsters. He can't tank them forever, but he can tank them enough to the point where it buys him enough time to stop said beams from hitting him. So he's extremely strong, fast, agile, incredibly intelligent, able to outthink most monsters, has a great body shape, and he'd also have excellent experience. I like to think that on Skull Island you'd find gruesome kaiju and dinosaurs there, since King Kong would be a proper kaiju. This means, unbeknownst to Godzilla, King Kong lives on an island with monsters as big and bigger than him. They'd give Godzilla a run for his money, and Kong is just fighting for survival every day, and he's managed to remain as god of his island. That would go to show that Kong is the monster on Skull Island who is in the league with the big guys like Godzilla and Gamera and maybe even Ultraman, you know? I mean, I don't watch Ultraman, but I really dig the idea ever since I saw this animation of Godzilla versus Ultraman on SFM. It's one where, not sci-fi guys, but it was this other one where Ultraman performed this badass judo flip Like first he slapped Godzilla's chest twice and then flipped him over. It was executed perfectly. Major props to that animator. But yeah, so King Kong is one of the greats. Like he's the one who can match Godzilla and overpower him. And I mean, even Rodan would also be able to match and overpower Godzilla. But Kong is a different story. He's more up there with Godzilla, if not greater. I mean, the people I like to think can match and overpower Godzilla, but are on the same level, is King Kong, Rodan, King Caesar, and Anguirus sometimes, and Mothra, you know. Anguirus and Baragon, and even Varan, is it Varon? I always say Varan. They can give Godzilla a run for his money, but will eventually succumb to the beating of the Kaiju King. But a character like Mothra is one who King Kong and Godzilla can fight and sometimes win, but when they're really out of hand, Mothra would beat them. So, yeah. I kind of lost track there. God. So, yeah, Kong on his island is king. The villagers are horrifying, mountains are bigger than the monsters and they're very jagged. There are ruins all over the island, and the trees are way, way bigger. You know, 2005 had the perfect Skull Island. I mean, it just wasn't kaiju filled because it wasn't a kaiju world. It was King Kong's world. It's his universe in that series, or that King Kong universe. This would be very close to that. And I like to think Kong would have some Godzilla monsters on his island, such as Rodan and Anguirus. So yeah, King Kong would be a match for Godzilla, and he'd win the fight, in my opinion. I mean, it is my headcanon, and Kong would start the universe. Much like in real life, he'd be the first monster, and is all natural growth, while Godzilla would be a mutated abomination. They would be sticking closely to their origins. If you want to know more about my personal Godzilla headcanon, give me a shout. Also, interesting fact, the closest King Kong has been to being shown in present day in live action was in the Chad film King Kong Lives. I think closest ever must have been around Kong the Animated Series, an amazing show. Or maybe it's the show that takes place in the future, but we don't talk about that one. Closest to present day is Kong the Animated Series until 2020. I am so psyched for Godzilla vs. Kong. I'm just hoping we get a battle where they're both shown to be equals at the very least, and Kong will go the distance with Godzilla and give him a run for his money, and the battle will be extremely close. I do not want it to be a stomp, no way. And there can't be a death either. And no team up, my god. Unless the Monsterverse is officially over afterwards, then yeah, allow a team up, sure, why not? But if the Monsterverse will continue, absolutely 100 positively no team up. But yeah, I will make a video on like what I want from Godzilla 2 and Godzilla vs. Kong. But yeah, so just remember to show King Kong some respect. He did start the genre and was both America and Japan's first giant monster, pioneering in the arts of both stop motion and suitmation. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more. This is King Kong 19100 signing out. See ya.